in and support the information that I put out, because I do my best to make sure, first of all, I share the story of the sung and unsung heroes of the African diaspora. That's what On the Shoulders of Giants is created for, to make sure that the Black history that we normally are not privileged to learning, we're privileged to learning through this channel. I want to make it easy. It's our stories from our perspective at your fingertips. So thank you to all of my subscribers, everybody who like my videos, everybody who comment on the videos, everybody who continue to support this movement that I have going on. So make sure you like this video, because like I said, YouTube got this strange thing, right? If you like the videos and if you comment and you share, more people can see it. So you can add to the number of people who are able to learn from this information that we provide for you here. Remember, our website is www.ontheshoulders1.com, where you can get more information about myself. You can get more information about On the Shoulders of Giants as a whole. I do have an app that's available on my website. It's available for Android. I have my Apple app developed, and I'm getting my final tweaks together for the Apple app, so it'll be available. But for right now, I do have it available on Android. And you can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/OTSOG for exclusive content, online courses, and you will always get the videos and information that I put out first. All right, so without further ado, I'm not going to do too much rambling. Just make sure y'all like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. So I was scrolling through Facebook a couple weeks ago, and I can't remember. I think I was in one of the groups. Now, I believe it was a group I was scrolling through, but I saw information about a Black fashion history podcast. So, my alarms just went off. First of all, anybody who is a history enthusiast like myself, I'm excited. But now, I'm not the best fashion person. For me, as long as I match and I'm not wrinkled, I'm good. I'm not gonna act like I'm the most fashionable person, but I'm gonna learn some more about it today. But I came across the Black Fashion History podcast, and a young lady named Taniqua Taniqua Russ, and I felt compelled to reach out because it's some, how sometimes when you come across something that just jumps out to you. So I had to make this connection happen. So give you a little background information. So Taniqua Russ is a content creator and marketing specialist. She holds an undergraduate and graduate degree in communications, but her real passion is fashion. She started out as a blogger in 2014 and has used that momentum to launch her current podcast, Black Fashion History Podcast. She uses that platform to highlight the accomplishments and history of professionals in the fashion industry. Although she has over 6 years of experience in fashion and beauty and marketing, Taniqua is just a girl with a desire to create and better her community. When she's not working on her many projects, you can find her reading, traveling, and spending way too much money shopping online. And she also has her own fashion brand that she created that we will learn about today. So blackfashionhistory.com is the website. She's blended fashion and history. And so anytime we get to learn about ourselves and be fly doing it, we got to take advantage of it. So everybody, welcome Miss Taniqua Russ.
Right. Well, thank you for having me. That was such an amazing introduction.
No, thank you. Thank you. I try to make sure I lay the red carpet out for my guests, because I always remind myself that you don't have to be here. You chose to be here. You chose to take your time out. So I want to make sure I honor your time and give you the best experience as possible.
Well, I appreciate that.
No problem. So I know I'm anxious to learn more, and I have a lot of my viewers who are anxious to learn more. So and I just gave a synopsis, but can you kind of just give us the background information about yourself? Like, how did you become interested in fashion? How did you become interested in history? And how did that all come together with your full platform now?
Okay, so for the longest time, like for as far back as I can remember, I've always been interested in fashion. Like I would watch America's Next Top Model all the time and learn about designers, try to copy the model poses. Like I'm always reading magazines, just always getting my hands onto fashion. And my mom is also just really into fashion. Like she drilled in me how important it is to like look your best, make sure every time you step out the house you look presentable. So that's always been just a part of my upbringing. Um,
Okay.
so when I went to college, I minored in fashion and majored in journalism because at the
Hmm.
time I wanted to be like a fashion editor. And it was
Okay.
like throughout my experience in college that I realized, I wasn't really learning about people that look like me in fashion.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of where the history piece came in. It came in a little bit later. Like I wasn't always interested in history. I actually
Right.
had to take a fashion history course. And I didn't I dropped out of the class because I was like, oh, this is boring. Like, who wants to learn about this stuff, right?
Right.
And then just kind of like as going on in life and like with more of my experiences working in fashion and beauty, working in marketing, I just was seeing even further confirmation that we're just not learning about ourselves in this space.
Hmm.
I had an experience where I was talking to a stylist and I asked her, it's like, who are some like Black fashion brands or Black designers or Black luxury brands? And she's like, there really isn't any out there. And that triggered me. And I was like, well, I know that's not true. I don't
Right.
know who they are at this point, but I know that that can't be true because I recognize that we exist in every space. And so I kind of
Hmm.
took this journey to go on and discover like who are the Black designers, who are the Black professionals in fashion, who are the ones that came before us in 2020. And I started Black fashion history just as kind of an archive because I wanted people like me who had those same questions, like who are the
Right.
Black people in fashion that came before me, like that they had a place to go look it up.
Right. Right.
Um, so that's what, brought me here to this point today.
Now that's cool. So where did you go to college?
I went to Georgia Southern University.
Okay. Okay. Georgia Southern. All right. Now that's real cool because it's kind of similar to me. I started on the shoulders of giants because I've always been a history enthusiast, but my day job is HIV/AIDS prevention and sexual violence prevention, and I was teaching a class of young Black girls. It was a school predominantly Black, young Black girls,
Mhm.
and they didn't know who Harriet Tubman was. And I
Oh,
was like, I'm born in the '80s, so it was like three people we were taught about, and Harriet Tubman was one of those three. So I just
right,
assumed that everybody knew who she was. And then when it really clicked that these young girls had no idea who Harriet Tubman was. So my thoughts was if they don't know who Harriet Tubman was, imagine how many other people they don't know who
right.
just did great things, who look just like.
Exactly. And we can't depend on like the school systems to teach us our history because, it wasn't created to teach us our history, right? So we have to
Right.
be proactive about passing that knowledge on to the next generation to make sure that our stories carry on. Because, like you said, those girls didn't know who Harriet Tubman was. If they never learned, they would have never had the opportunity to teach their kids. And then you have generations from now, Harriet Tubman's story would have been completely forgotten. It would be like she
Exactly.
didn't even exist.
Exactly. So while you were in college, did you become a part of any of the fashion troops, or were there any fashion troops?
Yeah, so my campus did have a fashion troupe. I wasn't a
Okay.
part of the fashion troupe, but I worked as a fashion writer for our newspaper.
Okay.
I judged some of the like fashion competitions that we had on campus. There were styling competitions that we had on campus. I won a styling competition. So I was definitely involved in the fashion scene with my college. Like I said, at the time, my goal was to be like the editor of Vogue or something. Like I
Right.
really
Right.
wanted to be the woman that sat at the front row on the runways and, like made the decisions about what's fashion and what's not.
Right. Now that's so cool. So cool. But that actually also leads into my next question. I have an idea of what I think fashion is, but I don't think my idea is very fashionable either. But from your perspective, and also from a Black perspective, what is fashion? And from your research, what is like the origins of Black fashion?
Well, for a long time, I think we as people have bought into the idea that fashion is what the magazines tell us it is, what media, what TV says it is, what Vogue says it is. But really, fashion is just however you choose to express yourself outwardly. So, that comes in clothing, that comes in shoes, that comes in hairstyles, nails. And for Black people, we have really consistently over the years taken, that self-expression of our appearance to the next level. So when it comes to fashion for us, it's not just about clothes, but it's also about hair. It's about makeup. It's about the nails, the accessories. We use everything to express ourselves. And for Black people and Black fashion, that really has an origin from really since the beginning of time, the beginning of human civilizations. One thing that Black people have consistently done over the years is make themselves look good, and sometimes out of necessity, and other times just out of sheer enjoyment of liking your appearance. So if you think back to the ancient Egyptian empires, or the ancient Kush and Nubian empires, people wore these big elaborate jewelry and necklaces, or eyeliners or headpieces. That is an expression of Black fashion. If you travel, a little more further in time, if you think about during slavery and the slave trade, old pieces of clothing or pieces from their masters, and they will whip, things up together to make themselves look nicer, to clothe themselves. That was also an expression of Black fashion. If you go further, into the 60s, Black people used fashion as to kind of, fight for civil rights and express, their desires for equality. So fashion is tied into our history. We use it a variety of ways, and we actually direct, what is considered fashionable. But the cool thing about that is that, as Black people, what's fashionable to us is really just what feels comfortable.
Right. And I'm glad you said it like that. You explained it like that, because as you was explaining, you made me think about the importance of us understanding our history. Because if fashion is how we express ourselves outwardly, if I either don't know my history, or I've been taught to hate my history and my culture, I will seek to express myself through another person's lens instead of through my own lens. That wouldn't be a healthy expression. So I like the way you framed that.
Exactly. And no, you're absolutely right. If we don't recognize our history, then we take on what other people say we are, and that's how we live our lives.
Right. So you took your love for communications, journalism, took your love for fashion. You started a blog. 2014, you started a blog. It became the Black Fashion History Podcast. And what was the importance behind your podcast, though? Because a lot of people, I have a podcast I started because I wanted to talk, but the importance of it is I wanted to be able to connect, wanted to be able to connect my community to resources. So what's the importance behind you starting your podcast?
Well, really, it's kind of similar to, why you started On the Shoulders of Giants. It was to teach us about our history. And I didn't want to continue a cycle where a lot of these people were forgotten. So I talk to people in fashion. They will have no idea who some of these Black designers were, but they could tell you who Coco Chanel is. They could tell you who Christian Dior is. They can explain to you the importance and the impact of those people on the fashion industry, but they couldn't do the same for a Black person. And that's because they aren't taught that. And the more that we lack in teaching people about our history, the more it's forgotten. I just was tired of Black history, and specifically in the fashion industry, being forgotten. So I wanted
Right.
to ensure that it will be around forever. So like, even if I'm not here, my podcast is out there, it's on the internet, nothing goes away on the internet. So
Right.
people will be able to find this history.
Right. So going through your site, I saw some of the comments that people were leaving about your podcast. Um, as content creators, especially in a public space, something like YouTube or anything else, you can get a lot of negativity. But the first time you got comments about your podcast that showed you or that kind of reinforced that what you were doing is something good, like what was that first time, or do you remember that standout comment, or not even if you remember it word for word, but just something that first comment or that first word of encouragement that was like a stamp of approval for
I don't know if I remember the very first time, but I will say that when I started my podcast, when I put up the first episode, I had to go on vacation that same
you?
week, and I didn't have any service or anything. So I didn't get a chance to like check to see if people are listening. And so when I came back and I like checking my phone, I was so surprised to see the number of listeners. Now, I think it was like 20 people at the time, but the fact that to me, like people outside of myself, were listening to my podcast, I didn't even get a chance to promote the first episode, was amazing to me. And then
Right.
thereafter, people would send me like DMs about how much they've learned from the different episodes, or they'll leave, reviews on the different podcasting platforms. And that just kind of reinforced, the importance of the work that I do. And it just made me excited to learn that, people are listening, they're excited to learn this history, and they want more of it. So that was a
Yeah.
great feeling. Fortunately, I have not had like negative comments yet. So I'm thankful for that. But I'm just excited that it has been so well received. And I'm excited to be doing something for my community, and not just my community, because people who aren't Black listen to the podcast and they
Right.
send me messages like, wow, I didn't know this person existed. And to me,
Right.
that does wonders, because, we are not always in the position of power. And so
Right.
if you can have people who are in the positions of power, or who are more likely to be in those positions, hear our story, know our history, it gives them the responsibility of making sure that, equality happens and diversity happens in the industry.
Right. Right. And I believe that for Black people, we've had a unique history here in America through our enslavement and everything, but we've always been able to be resilient, but also um, show the beautiful parts of our creativity as well. Being able to take nothing and turn it into something. And it's funny how um, Black people are seen as, well, the America doesn't really favor us, but our culture is so beloved. Our fashion is so beloved.
Right.
It's funny. It's funny when Vogue magazine. Sometimes I just want to throw something at people at Vogue. Black people have been doing this for 40 years, and it's new now for white people. And it's just
Right.
like, are you serious? Like, stop that.
Right.
But that's why you exist, though. That's why people like you exist. So you can help our people and others understand that now we've actually done this for a while. So
No,
so
I completely agree.
yeah. So why should, like, your podcast, why should people listen to your podcast? When they do turn in, what type of experience can people expect from listening to your podcast?
So one thing that you can expect is a lot of information, but in a good way.
Good,
You can
good.
expect to get a lot of knowledge about historical fashion figures, and to learn, about a portion of Black history that you may not be familiar with. So
Mhm.
again, like when we think about Black history, I know we think about Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman, Malcolm X, those kind of worldwide figures or figures that have been accepted, by society as like the top Black,
Right.
figures. But we very rarely tell the stories of, other people. And so Black
Mhm.
fashion history gives the opportunity for the stories of other people to be heard, and not just people who have like passed away or existed before, but people who are existing now who have done some amazing things, but you've never heard of them. Like I
Right.
had the opportunity to have the costume designer for Living Single. She also like styled Janet Jackson.
Right.
She's also worked as a costume designer of A Different World. And if you think about Black culture and how much of our fashion and style we take from these different
Yeah.
sitcoms,
Yeah.
there's a woman. This woman put all of those things together. She essentially supplied us with the inspiration, and a lot of people just don't know who she is. So it's like an honor for me to be able to interview her and have her be on the show to share her story, so that we don't
Right.
have to wait till she passed away, to
Right.
discover who she is. Like we get to celebrate her now. And that's really, what the show is about, is highlighting the people who have done great things in this industry, who have contributed to it, and being able to celebrate them if they're here now.
Right. Right. So, and for all my listeners, blackfashionhistory.com is the website where you can go listen to a podcast. And is your podcast only available on your website?
No, so my podcast is available on all podcasting platforms, as well as my website. So wherever works for you, you go to Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Pocket Cast, anything.
Okay. Okay. So she's available everywhere. Go subscribe. Go
Yes.
subscribe. Make sure you go visit the website. Go subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you support, because that's the whole purpose of what we're doing here, to learn more about the people from our community who contribute to the information and just the upliftment of our community, but to make sure we support the people that we have within our community. So black culture is beloved, it's revered. Black
Yes.
people
Different
are
story.
not right. Right. When I realized that, I was pissed. I was mad. But I had to remind myself how oppression and white supremacy works. So
Right.
black black people created fashion, black people created clothing, black people created cool, black people created all these things. Now we don't control it at this moment. We don't control the fashion industry, and I think we should. But throughout all of our ups and downs, throughout all the oppression and things, what type of impact has black fashion had on the fashion industry as a whole?
I don't even know if I can say, like, within this short period of time, the impact that Black people have had on the fashion industry, because it's been extensive. Like you mentioned, we are like the directors of cool. We dictate what cool is, what culture is, and a lot of times, the general society attaches itself to it, and then now they want a piece of it.
Right.
You think about like we were talking about earlier, Vogue just now discovering some of the things that we've been doing all around, for years now, and now they call it cool. Like you see people
Yeah.
like Kylie Jenner, she's wearing a do-rag. And you think about how that has been engraved in Black culture, for years now.
Yeah.
Outside of just being like a fashion piece, it's been a part of like our lifestyle as people. You think about like braids or even like hoop earrings. Everybody loves wearing hoop earrings now. But back in the late 80s and early 90s, when all the Black girls were wearing hoops, it was considered ghetto,
Yeah.
so we have consistently like steered, what is cool, what is fashionable for years. And that started, from the beginning of time. Like I keep saying, if we want to talk about slavery here in America, a lot of the like white women or the slave masters, their wives, they depended on the Black slave women to make their clothing. And so whatever these women made, that's what was fashionable. And then, you know, they would make clothing for their friends and, you know, everyone else in high society. So it was really like these Black enslaved women who were saying like what is fashionable at the time. And that has continued like even till today. Like, you know, we have a lot of the celebrities today when they wear things by like Black designers or Black stylists, sometimes they don't give the credit, but these are the people that are responsible for telling you what cool is or what fashion is.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Because I look around at the landscape and I wonder, just as a historian, because I know a lot of our creations and inventions have been stolen. So sometimes I wonder with these fashion brands, was there a Black person that was the original inspiration behind what either launched the brand or what made the brand extra popular at the time? Because just thinking back, um, Black people, we've created so much that was taken from us. So I
Right.
think about that a lot when I look at these high-end brands.
And a lot of times that has been the case. You know, I had a woman on my show. Her name is Dr. Aziza Bey. She's a fashion designer as well as a musician, among like other things. And she talked about how while she was designing, there were times where she would work on sets and design clothing for movies, and they wouldn't list her name in the credits,
Wow.
you know, as the person designing, like that she had to fight for it. And a lot of times they wouldn't list it. She shared with me that she worked on the movie Miss Congeniality, and they didn't want to list her name in the credits. And I think it was that I always get them confused, Sandra Bullock or Julia Roberts. I think it was Sandra Bullock, had to really kind of use her influence to make sure that she was listed.
Wow.
And then she'd also share that sometimes they would list her as like a production assistant, which if you know anything about the industry, production assistants, you know, make less money than like a head stylist or a head costumer. And so that would affect how she gets paid. That affects, you know, like whether or not your name is up there or like what point in the credits your names get listed. After a certain point, you know, people stop watching or people leave the movie so they don't see you or they don't pay attention to you. Other movie studios don't pay attention to production assistants to hire them. So I have no doubt that there are probably situations where there were Black people who have worked on things, have helped launch brands and did not get the credit they deserve. And the problem with that is that because they didn't get the credit they deserve, we have no idea who they are, you know, to even be able to uncover their story unless they're alive to tell you themselves.
Yeah, it's not, I still don't like to hear those stories. It's unbelievable, but believable at the same time, if that makes sense. Because you know, we've heard so many stories of our people not getting their credit. So, but it's just amazing too, though, that the creations continue to happen, the inspiration continues to happen. Like I was having a conversation with somebody earlier in the week about the impact of just the '90s, this '90s fashion, '90s culture, this '90s hip hop culture. How that, like, there you have people in Asia right now walking around looking like the way we looked in the '90s, and I'm just like, that's amazing. Like Black culture is so inspirational. So,
Right. No, exactly. And you know, this whole wave of 90s is coming back. Even the 90s Black brands are coming back. You know, Carl Kanai is back. Sean John just relaunched or just launched his women's wear last week. Like FUBU, you know, all of these brands that we wore are coming back. But the interesting about them coming back is that they're not coming back to necessarily Black platforms, but they're coming back to platforms that are more mainstream and that have like largely, you know, white or other consumers. So that kind of shows you the impact of these brands. Like Sean John launched on Misguided, you know, which is really targeted towards like the same kind of woman that would shop at Forever 21.
Right.
Back when we used to wear that stuff, you can only find that at like Dr. J's or Jimmy Jazz or something like that, which was clearly for Black consumers. So I think even that these like relaunches are showing you, how influential like our brand and our culture is.
Yeah. Platinum Fubu is still a hit somewhere. So, but I've always been curious because I I get it, but I don't get it. What makes these high end brands like high end? What makes them luxury? What makes these brands like Gucci and Louis and some of these other, besides them being white owned brands, what really
Mhm.
makes these brands uh to be seen as better or the more high end brand than black brands or even other brands?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. So, one is our mindset as people. Like we are we put this like stigma on these brands that like when you make it, these are the brands that you should wear. These are the things that you should own. Like they are status symbols. And, they're status symbols because we make them status symbols.
Right.
So that's one thing, but also I'll say that's the thing in terms of some people viewing those brands as better than or more valuable than Black brands. But in terms of what makes a brand luxury, it really is a combination of things. So that has to do with how things are made, the materials that are used. And in the case of brands like Gucci and Louis Vuitton, Chanel, Dior, those kinds of things, that also has to do with legacy. These brands have been around for years, since like the 1800s, and they have consistently sold a lifestyle. So it's not just like the clothing or the jewelry, it's like this luxury and exclusive lifestyle. And then the more that you attach famous people and celebrity and rich people to these things, the further that they can sell that lifestyle. And that kind of is what plays into our mindset as people that, okay, these are brands that we need to aspire to. And so one of the things that I hope to do with my podcast is really just change that perception. Like, Black brands can be status symbols as well. Like, why is it that when we get a whole bunch of money as Black people, like we go buy an Hermes Birkin bag? Like that's the big talk of the town right now. Why
Right.
can't we drop some money on like some Black owned brands? Like why can't we spend a whole bunch of money on a Telfar bag, which is a Black owned brand? Let
Right.
that be the status symbol. Especially as a culture, since we as Black people really dictate like what's cool and what's
Right.
popular, it's important for us to use that power and that influence on our own brands and to boost up our own community. And so if people are going to be buying into what we're buying into, then let's direct them to Black brands. So
Right.
if Kylie Jenner and the Kardashians want to start wearing do-rags, well, let them buy do-rags from Black people.
You go.
We don't have to allow the Gucci's or whatever to make things that derived in our culture and then make money off of us.
Yeah, because they definitely have had a lot of free promotion in these rap songs over the decades.
Right. And that's the other thing. I'm like, let's rap about Black brands.
Exactly. Exactly. So, who were some of the Black fashion pioneers? Who are some of the names that we should know about, that we should start telling other people about, who really set the stage for Black fashion, not just in America, but across the world?
I have a lot of favorites. I share them all on my podcast, but I'll definitely say one of those I would say is Willie Smith. So he is an American designer. He's passed away now, but he was very popular in the 80s, and he has to date the most successful brand ever.
Okay.
And that, unfortunately, his brand isn't existing anymore. Like you can probably just find it in vintage stores or for people who are living in that time and purchased it. But at the time of his work, he was highly successful. Like having Willie Smith clothing or Willie wear clothing was the it thing for both men and women. And he kind of set the pace for not just Black designers, but designers in general. I would also say Zelda Wind Valdez, she is credited with creating the Playboy Buddy outfit. So a lot of people see that and they have no idea that that was conceptualized by a Black woman. But she would do fashion shows in the Playboy Bunny Club back when it was just the club. And, you know, the staff really wanted something for their waitresses that accentuated their body. And that's what she was known for, because she used to work with curvaceous Black women. She dressed like Ella Fitzgerald, Josephine Baker, Dorothy Dandridge, all of these curvaceous, beautiful Black women. And she was known for outfitting, like really creating things that fit our curves. And we kind of wanted that same look for the Playboy Bunny waitresses. And so she created this like waist snatching, curvy outfit that like is still in use today. There's also like Ann Lowe, who created Jackie Onassis Kennedy's wedding dress. Like that is in the museums today. And many people aren't aware that a Black woman created her wedding dress. And her wedding dress has been like the talk of the town when it comes to like first ladies and their clothing and like some of the amazing pieces that they've worn in history. And a Black woman created that. And not only did she create it, but she created it in like 10 days. And that's because she made one version, and unfortunately her studio had flooded. So all of the dresses, the wedding dress and the bridesmaids dresses, were destroyed, but she still had to come up with dresses for the wedding. And so she whipped it up in 10 days and was able to deliver this phenomenal dress still. So that's just like a few of my favorite figures. And that just kind of shows you like the work that we've done over the years and how we've contributed to the industry. But a lot of those stories have been lost. So I love the different platforms outside of mine, but like museums and people who are working in fashion to really start like increasing the buzz around these names so that they aren't forgotten and people can learn about the history.
Right. Is there a fashion museum, like a Black or a fashion museum or a Black fashion museum?
There used to be. So there's this woman named Lois Alexander. She's no longer living. I think she passed away in 2009, if I'm not mistaken. But she actually is a designer herself, and she created the Black Fashion Museum. And it was the largest collection of clothing either worn by Black people or designed by Black people since colonial times. So she's had pieces that were created by enslaved women. She had dresses created by Ann Lowe, who created Jackie Kennedy's wedding dress. She's had the costumes from the original play The Wiz, because that was also created by Black people. So there was a Black fashion museum for a time. It was actually in Harlem, but upon her passing, she donated all of that, or her daughter, I'm sorry, donated all of that stuff to the Smithsonian, to the African American Museum at the Smithsonian. So they now have that collection.
Okay. That's so cool.
But I would love if something like that could be revived again. I'd love to do it, to have a Black fashion museum and, you know, something that can stand the test of time. Like I would want it to be around like the other fashion museums that are out there.
Right. So was because I did a little research with a little bit of time that I had, not too extensive, but was Ann Lowe one of the first recognized Black fashion designers?
Yeah, so she is considered the first Black fashion designer, or who people recognize. Obviously, there are people before her, but like she's recognized as the first Black high fashion designer.
Okay, and then you have others who follow behind her and just creating this great stuff. So I see because I was looking at different podcasts that you posted, and um, I like one that caught my eye was the history and impact of Sean John. And so, growing up, especially in the bad boy era, I grew up in that era. I got it. I get it when I see you create a podcast about the history and impact of Sean John, because Sean John has had a definite impact, whether it's just urban casual wear, even uh, dressing up, looking your fly. So, um, why did you feel like you needed to make a podcast on the history and impact of Sean
Well, I thought it was important because a lot of people don't understand the history of the brand or the impact of the brand. And a lot of people think the impact just extends onto it was just a popular brand by Diddy at the time. But I'm like, if you really dig deep into it, you'll find out that it's been more influential than we could have ever imagined. So Sean John wasn't unique, because it came out at the time where every other like rapper had a brand. Like there was Rockaware, every rapper, that was kind of the thing for rappers in the 90s. It's like you're a rapper, you part of a crew, like every rapper had their crew, and then you also had a climb. That's just how John was no different, but it is the longest lasting, like
John?
quote unquote urban clothing line. Like all of those other lines do not exist. Like Sean John is currently in production today, not just like things that you see at the thrift store, but like they make new clothes,
Right.
today you can find them at Macy's. Also, Sean John was one of the few Black brands to really transition into like the luxury fashion or the high fashion space. Like not a lot of Black brands were showing at New York Fashion Week. You didn't really see them at the runways, but Sean John, Fat Farm, and Baby Fat, I think, were like the main brands that you could go and see them like on the runways. They were part of like that fashion scene. And during the 90s and early 2000s, that was really important. Like fashion worked a little bit differently than it does today. So for you to be at New York Fashion Week, that was kind of like your stamp of approval, your like check mark that you were a legit brand, like you were like a Vogue backed or magazine backed brand. The
Right.
other thing about Sean John is that Diddy was the first Black designer to receive a CFDA award for menswear, and that's basically like the Oscars of fashion. He was the first Black designer to receive that, which is interesting because he's not what you would consider a traditional designer,
Right.
and also this was an urban brand. Like this is not like something like Polo Ralph Lauren or Calvin Klein, which were his competitors, or like Tom Ford, which was like his competitor in that category. This was a Black brand from a dude from Harlem, like worn by rappers, worn by like kids from the ghetto. Like it wasn't anything that you would really think of when you think high fashion at the time. And it won this big award. It beat out like all of these top luxury brands for this award. And like Sean John really just was able to transition not just from like streetwear clothing, but to also dress up clothing and kind of just provide you with a lifestyle brand and lifestyle pieces outside of just like, your puffer jackets or your jeans or whatever. And so I think it's important for people to recognize like, yeah, we may not be wearing or into Sean John like that nowadays, but let's not forget all of the things that it's done for the fashion industry, how it's paved the way. Like Sean John really is the blueprint for all of the like hot brands that people are rocking today, like all the Off-White stuff, Hood by Air, Fear of God, all of that stuff that people wear today. That's basically Sean John with another name on it.
Right. Right. Now that's cool, and I think we need to know that. We need to understand that. But like I said, when I saw it, I got it because I remember, the best shirts I had coming up, especially like high school, college. Some of the best shirts I had was Sean John, and they were, my button-up shirts. And then you would go into the thrift stores, and some of the best. Right, right. And then you see nice, real nice, not like your Easter Sunday suits, but like real nice
Yeah.
suits made from Sean John. So I'm like, okay, Sean John has something good. But so with all that being said, why is it important for Black people to have our space in the fashion industry, or to even be recognized in the fashion industry?
Well, it's important for us to control our own narrative. You know, like we've been talking about, Black people have contributed so much. A lot of mainstream style comes from us, and it's important for us to own that. So because it is ours, we created it, we should also be able to profit off of it. Black
Right,
people are like the top consumers, when it comes to fashion and beauty, but we don't have like stake in the game. Like
right,
we aren't at the top of the industry in terms of like ownership or owning any of the big companies or making any of the money that we need to be making from our style. So I think it's important for us to be able to not only contribute to the industry in terms of creative and ideas, but to also own it and to profit off of it.
right.
And I
Now
think
that's real.
that's a long road, because that requires us or, to kind of break down barriers and fight for our space and for our equity, and to create our own things as well, to make sure that we're getting that ownership and then create space for other people and help
Sure.
people come up. So that is a long road. But there are a lot of resources and people out there that are kind of doing the work to make sure we're getting to that place. Like two of my favorite resources, one of them is called Harlem Fashion Row. And they're essentially like a fashion organization that really helps Black designers kind of grow their business, by giving them money and grants and exposure and all of that, so they can have a stake in the game when it comes to fashion. And
Right.
another one that's doing a similar thing is the Black in Fashion Council. I think that was just launched like this year. Like they're really working to create diversity in the industry to make sure that we're not just there, but that we own a piece, because ownership is important.
Yes. Yes. We one of my favorite historians, Dr. John Henry Clark, is always saying, well, used to always say, until we control our industries, we just like passerbys, we just participants, and
Exactly.
we should no longer be the labor class for somebody else.
Exactly. And I think for fashion, it's very like that's the most apparent is that we have been the labor class for so long. Like people tap people for creative things like, oh, they want a Black stylist, a Black hairstylist, a Black designer, all of that. But, they never tap Black people for the leadership position. Like, why don't you want a Black president of this company? A Black finance officer. Like, why don't you go to a Black investment firm for money? Like, and we really need to get up in those leadership positions to really have like true skin in the game.
Right. Right. Um, I'm going to connect you with there's Tallahassee African Fashion Week. It happens once a year. I actually had the
Oh,
privilege of hosting the last two shows, but it's a Candace May and Gail May is a mother and daughter combination, and this now I don't know what's going to happen this year with Corona, but
yeah.
um, I'm definitely still going to connect you with them because what you're doing and what they're doing is similar, and I'm sure you two can
Yes,
help each
please
other.
do. I
Yeah, I
love
will.
connecting with like-minded people.
Yeah, so I needed to say that before I forget it because I know once I said it, it will be in my mind. But definitely want to connect you with Candace because I can see you two being able to help each other. Um, so I'm definitely going to do that. But when you're talking about us controlling our own spaces, that's what I thought about. Um, Black people who are in the fashion industry who may not be the well-known fashion designers, but they're fashion designers nevertheless. They are amazing
Right.
fashion designers, and we need to know who those people are and just connecting everybody. So I'm definitely anybody I know. Most people I learn about fashion, I'm gonna be connecting them to you. So definitely.
Well, I'm here for it.
Yes, ma'am. So culture, we talked about culture, we talked about fashion. Um, how does culture play a role into the fashion that's created, or even how the fashion is wore by the people who create the culture and create the fashion?
It's intertwined. Like fashion is an expression of culture.
Right.
Um, and like the greatest example I can think of is like, hip hop is one example where it's very evident that fashion is an expression of culture. You think about how people from the North dress, from New York versus people from the South, like people from Atlanta, how they dress.
Hmm.
That's an expression of their day to day culture. Like the joke online is like people from New York, they wear Timbs 24/7,
Yeah.
365 days a year, because that's a fashion piece. That's an expression of the culture and of like their lifestyle in that area. So I think it really is intertwined. And that's why it's a bit frustrating when you have white spaces that kind of culturally appropriate because they're taking the fashion without understanding the culture that's connected to it. And then even beyond that, without giving credit or appreciating the people where it comes from. And so they're detaching it from its meaning.
Right.
Uh, and that's where it gets just really insulting and like frustrating for us because like we having that happen to us consistently where people don't understand like for you this is just like these are boxer braids, right? Like, but for us, these are cornrows. This is the way that we've been wearing our hair for years. This is a protective style for Black women. Like, it's connected to so many things that you couldn't even begin to imagine because you didn't
Yes.
take the time, to do so.
Right. Right. Yeah. When I learned that some braiding patterns were actually maps to freedom,
Right.
it's you have to take the time, especially those non-black people who call themselves allies. I was watching girl girlfriends, it's on Netflix now, so I was watching it,
Yeah. I
and
love
they did an
girlfriends.
episode. Right, that's my show. But they did the episode with Lynn's uh white
Her
sister.
sister.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and she was just appropriating. But one thing that she said I thought was very important, even though in the show they made it like, okay, this was the reconciliation, but she was like, I can't help it. I just love Black culture. And I'm just sitting on there, sitting on edge, waiting on her to follow that up with. And I love Black people as well. But it's just like the way it came out, I just love Black culture. It's like, well, Black people make that culture, but it's like
Right.
exactly what you were saying. It's the people around the world who are not Black have learned to separate Black people from Black culture. And so it's easy to throw up the Wu-Tang sign without understanding the
Exactly.
struggle of Wu-Tang. Or even
Exactly.
like these brands, everybody was mad at Gucci for the things that they were doing. Um, all these when they the one brand that had the black boy in the shirt, the best monkey in the jungle, all those things.
Mhm.
Like what are your thoughts when these brands do these things and then like, oh, I apologize, I didn't mean to do it? Because me personally, I'm thinking that they know what they're doing. They got too
Yeah,
many
it's a
channels.
marketing strategy. That's how I see. Like offending Black people is the new marketing strategy because, um, we're gonna get up in arms about it. We're gonna tweet about it. Black Twitter is, where things become popular, and
Yeah,
then that brings more attention to the brand. So I don't think for a minute that these brands have no idea what they're doing. It's 2020,
right,
like so for you to in the year 2020 say that you didn't know it was offensive to do blackface or you didn't know
right,
that um certain terms were offensive, it's crazy to me. So I think it really just is one of two things: one, like a marketing strategy, but also just kind of showing the lack of care for your Black consumers. So I think
exactly,
it's like, we have these Black consumers, but we don't care enough about them. So it doesn't matter to us if we alienate them, you
right,
know? And I think that's really what the brands are doing. Like, it's proving, it's like a slap in the face. If you think about the amount of Black people that buy Gucci, that rap about Gucci, you know, that name themselves Gucci. Like, we have a whole rapper called
Exactly.
Gucci Mane. Like,
Right.
you know, so Gucci has been engraved in Black culture for a hip hop culture, especially for the longest time. And so for them as a brand to say, we do not care about our Black consumers enough to do the research, it's a slap in the face. And I think it shows that we need to take our loyalties elsewhere, because
Exactly.
they wouldn't do that to another customer base.
Right.
So brands
Now I'm
recognize
completely with
the customers, that spend the money with them, that's important to them, and they ensure that, they don't do things to alienate them. Like,
you. Right.
we talk about, I know a group of people that come up in this discussion a lot is Jewish people. Like, brands will not play about, the Jewish community. They won't say anything offensive. They won't say anything anti-Semitic, because they understand or they value that customer base.
Right.
But they don't do the same for us. And I think as people, we have to recognize that and not be afraid to take our loyalties elsewhere.
Exactly. Can you see this comment on the screen?
Yes, I can. Thank
Okay.
you, Garfield.
Yeah. And so he also posted this one as well. So I want to make sure you see these comments, because what you're doing is amazing, and you're opening up doors, like we said earlier, opening up historical doors. Most of us don't even think about opening up or think about going down, but every piece of our culture, every piece of our human existence is important to us. So kudos to you, and you deserve all of the accolades that you're getting.
Oh, thank you guys so much. You'll make me cry.
um Miata. Did I say it
Yeah,
right?
ooh, great. Yes.
Okay. Okay. I was looking at that thing the other day. I was like, make sure I say it right. So Miata is your brand. Can you
Yeah.
just give us more information about your brand and what you create?
So Miata is an accessories brand really inspired by Africa. I'm a first generation Liberian. So both my parents were born and raised in Liberia. They came to this country when they were adults. And I've always been inspired by this idea of African luxury. So being African, like, I know that there are luxurious things and people in Africa. I mean, that's where gold is, like diamonds. You have things like ivory, cow skin, all of that. All of those things are luxurious material. However, the media would like to portray African countries as, like, impoverished and all of that stuff. And so I really want to create a brand that celebrated the luxuries of Africa through fashion. And so that's what Miata is about. It's named after my mom. Her name is Miata. And it's also just a representation of just women and strong women. And the strongest women that I know are African women. And so that's why I created the brand. Everything is ethically made in Africa. So all of our jewelry comes from an African country. And it's handmade, which is the most luxurious thing ever. Like, a lot of these big brands, charge exorbitant amounts of money for things that are handcrafted, where in African countries, everything is handcrafted. Like, most of the clothing is made to order, jewelry is made to order, food is made to order. Everything is, like, made and customized individually. And so that's just all of those aspects of the continent is what the brand celebrates. And I really just wanted to do something that was like an ode to my culture, but also be a vehicle that I love.
Now it's cool because I looked through a lot of the pieces and I was like, okay, because my creativity comes out in writing and talking. Those are my creative areas. I'm a teacher, I'm a talker, I'm a writer. But when I see people who are great craftsmen and craftswomen who can just put things together, I'm always excited about that, because it takes a different vision and different skill sets to see that. So using the history of Black fashion, that's your vehicle. That's one of the things that you're using to uplift our people, to educate our people, to inspire our people. Um, when you get a chance to look back on your journey, or even just looking back from where you started to where you are now, but even like 10, 20 years from now, what's the impact, or what's kind of legacy or mark do you want to be able to leave on not just the fashion industry, but Black people, Black America, as well as the fashion
That's a heavy question. But I think I really just want to show us as people that we matter and that we're important. I think it's important for us to understand that, to recognize that, and to hold to that truth, and live our lives according to that truth. And so, like, by doing Black Fashion History, I'm sharing the stories to remind people that, like, we matter and we do things in this world. Like, no matter what anyone says or how people try to downplay our role or our existence as human beings, that's not true. We matter, and we're changing the world. And then,
yeah.
secondly, I want to just increase representation. I know a lot of why I wanted to be the things that I wanted to be when I was growing up is because I saw people that look like me. Like when I first wanted to be in communications, it's because I watched the movie Brown Sugar, and
Okay.
Sanaa Lathan's character was a journalist, and I'm like, and she worked at a magazine. I was like, oh, I would love to work at a magazine. Like, so
Yeah.
seeing people that look like me in these roles help inspire me and let me know that, okay, I can do it, whether or not that was real or fictional.
Mm-hmm.
And so sharing like real people out there who have accomplished so much in fashion, I'm hoping that, people coming up can see like, okay, I can do it. Like there's this person that, have contributed so much, or they made so much money, or they're this huge fashion figure. If they can do it, I can do it. If they come from where I come from and they were able to overcome, then I can do the same. And that's really the ultimate impact that I want to make, because I think things like that lead to just us building more wealth and like getting more power and being able to positively impact our lives and the lives of our children.
Right. Well, you are doing that. Do want to let you know you have a powerful platform, blackfashionhistory.com. Go to the website. Make going to her website part of your daily routine. You know how you check your social media?
Check Black
Black
Fashion.
Fashion History. There you go. Subscribe to her podcast. It's available on all podcast platforms. Black Fashion History Podcast. Make sure you subscribe. Um, is there any other way people can get in contact with you? What's the best way for people to get in contact with you if they want to interview you, if they want to invite you out as a guest or have you on their platforms?
Well, you can always go to blackfashionhistory.com to the contact tab, and you can contact me through there. I'm also on Instagram at Black Fashion History Podcast. I respond to DM, so you can send me a DM, but sometimes I'm like a few days late because Instagram has that weird thing where like your DMs go to like the other box. So,
Yeah,
but I'm very responsive, so you can hit me up on Instagram or through my website, and you should be able to get a response from me. And I love to talk, so send me a message.
Right, right. And we're going to make sure, I know I'm going to stay in contact with you, because if there's any way I can help you moving forward, please let me know. I'm going to continue to support you, continue to tell as many people about you and what you're doing as possible, because like I say, I appreciate what you do as a fellow creator, as a fellow podcaster. I understand the grind. I understand what it all goes into it as a fellow historian. So um definitely kudos to you and everything you do. And I'm, like I said, I'm just gonna tell as many people that I know about you. Share this video with so many people and just do what I can. So because I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate what you're doing as well. I think it's important to get our history out there. And so I love this platform. That's why I agreed to come on the show and do this, is because I really am behind, your mission as well.
I appreciate you. I definitely appreciate you. So not gonna take up any more of your time, but I definitely appreciate you spending your time with me. I learned a lot, learned some new things, have some new
Oh
insights
my
on Black fashion and Black history. I love learning. I'm the historian who don't mind saying I don't know it all, and I love learning new things. Yes, ma'am. So with that being said, I want to thank all of our viewers. Want to give a shout out to Nemesis X for his comments, as well as Garfield Dover for the comments. And yeah, we're going to make sure that if we continue to share this information, especially videos like this, like it, comment, share. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. That way we can make sure as many people as possible are able to see the information that we both are sharing, and just all the information that's available that's on this channel. But till next time, I'll see y'all later. Thank you, Taniqua. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.